Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Adventures Through the Mind. I am your host, as always, James W. Gesso. Today's guest is your mate Tom. Actually, his last name has a Z, and I don't know how to pronounce it, and I'm not going to try. But if you're watching this on YouTube, it's going to be written right in front of me, so you can imagine that I've said his full and proper name. But either way, he goes by your mate Tom on the internet. He is a YouTuber and recently a podcaster who explores various topics around psychedelic culture. I came to meet Tom through Julian Palmer, a former guest of the show, twice actually, and Julian suggested for Tom to check my work out, and I ended up on Tom's podcast and really enjoyed the content he was making and sort of felt a sense of kinship with him due to similar, industries with similar goals. And we ended up, creating a dialogue over a period of time, which eventually led me to being like, hey, you know what, Tom? I'd like to have you on my show. Specifically, I'd like to have you on my show to talk about what it's like to be a pro-psychedelic enthusiast on the internet, making, psychedelic trip simulations and telling your trippy stories to then end up being someone who was profoundly harmed by a psychedelic experience. And then how do you approach an audience of tens of thousands of people who, look up to you as this psychedelic guy to then go on record saying that psychedelics messed me up and I'm not taking them anymore. So Tom, obviously maybe I presented it poorly, but that's the situation that Tom was recently in, and it was interesting to get to sit down and talk with him about this. We actually tried this twice. The first round I wasn't happy with. We did a second round I'm much more happy with. It doesn't have the same feel as some of the other podcasts. It's a little bit more sort of conversational between Tom and I, which I really appreciate, and I really appreciate the capacity to talk with another person who's trying to do this YouTube psychedelic podcasting thing, because it's sort of a weird path to be on with a lot of pitfalls. And I notice that I am, really inspired by some content and then really just totally off-put by other content. So it was cool to get another person's perspective, someone who's in the same industry, and to do so in a situation that it is for the public record for you to enjoy. Of course, because the content of this episode is around Tom's experience with having come into a very dark trip, we talk a little bit about bad trips and shadow and darkness and the dangers of psychedelics, and a little bit about what it means to understand the existential terror that bad trips can offer, and how to then move into a place in your life where you've integrated that despite how massive the gravity of such an encounter might be. Obviously, for those following the show, you know that is something that I have gone through to a significant degree over a long period of time, and to less significant degrees in various points throughout my journey as a psychedelic user. So I appreciate the content of this episode, and I hope you do as well. Before we jump in, a big thanks to my patrons on Patreon, specifically the people whose names are listed in the upper corner on YouTube and in the description on jameswgesso.com or on the whatever podcast feed that you are listening to this on. This show is brought to you by listeners like yourself who choose to become my patrons or to donate to the show through PayPal or through cryptocurrency. So if you are enjoying the show, please take a moment to support it by dropping a donation or becoming my patron on Patreon. Patrons get inside scoops on things and some interesting, fun, additional content in advance, and sometimes get physical things. For example, certain patrons this summer, as I am touring Europe, will get random postcards from me from the different places that I will be traveling. Either way, some good bonuses there, but if you are to become my patron, I hope that you don't do it for the bonuses, but you do it because you really enjoy this content and you think it's valuable and you would like to further enable it being distributed for free to those people who are not in a place where they can financially support. One quick final thing before the interview starts. I am selling this legal blotter art out of 100. There was only, Jesus, where's my language? There's only 100 made. This is number 50. I am halfway sold out When you buy one, you get a sweet piece of art that is memorabilia and an artifact of the podcast, and you also support the travel adventure that I got coming up, which will include interviews with people on the road. I've actually got a setup now that I'm working with that you can't see because I'm using it, and a few other things like this light and this extra tripod, a little Joby bendy thing, and some mics and some hand recorders and just some stuff, and I'm really excited. So when you buy some of this blotter art, or when you become my patron on Patreon, or just drop a PayPal donation, you encourage that project and help fund the investments that have gone into the future production of that content. Okay, that's all. Please enjoy my episode with psychedelic YouTuber and podcaster, your mate Tom.
Tom's mission is to help guide people on their path to self-discovery and having an honest and practical approach to personal and spiritual growth. On his main channel, which is Your Mate Tom, he provides education and harm reduction on psychedelics and altered states of consciousness in an informative and fun way. His wish is to be a part of the psychedelic renaissance and contribute to the reduction of the social stigma behind these substances and serve as many people as he can to live a better life by expressing his authentic self through creative mediums such as videos, blogs, and podcasts. Good morning, Tom.
Yeah, good morning. How are you, James?
As you already know from the last 10 minutes, I'm, pretty good with some professional confusion and struggles in the midst of pretty good.
Yeah, I hear.
So I already recorded an interview with you, and you weren't particularly wanting me to release that. You wanted me to record it again. So
yes,
maybe at some point, I'll just ask you the same questions as before, and at some point, if in you answering the question and us having this conversation, it becomes obvious where you want to sort of input this reason for not wanting to, release the last video, then I invite you to do so. First question is, what was it that led you to deciding that it was right and good course of action to get yourself involved with YouTube, to get up into the public eye, or at least the mostly public eye of YouTube, and start talking about psychedelics?
Well, it all started leading up to my first ayahuasca experience. Like, I already dabbled with psychedelics here and there and had some pretty profound experiences, especially after listening to the Joe Rogan podcast and guests like Aubrey Marcus, Graham Hancock, Amber Lyon, like these people who are like psychedelic advocates. And yeah, it just got my attention. And this was at a time when I was in a really, really dark place. Was suffering through a lot of depression and anxiety, addictive tendencies to certain substances, and also negative thought and behavior patterns. So anyways, long story short, I heard about this ayahuasca thing and how much it's helped people, and I just felt the calling to go to Peru. And yeah, it was pretty scary because I went by myself, and yeah, it can be pretty nerve-wracking going to a foreign country in a dark jungle with a shaman giving you this potent psychedelic brew. So yeah, it was pretty scary, but I did it anyway just because I felt the calling. And yeah, I had a very transformative experience, and it just helped me learn a lot about myself and the nature of reality, or so I thought at the time anyway. And yeah, it pretty much stemmed from that, because I had that ayahuasca experience, I had a San Pedro experience pretty soon after that, but that whole psychedelic journey in Peru changed my life so much in a positive direction that I had the need to kind of speak about these topics and express how profound these tools can be if used correctly. So I started a YouTube channel talking about my very first ayahuasca trip. So that was my first video. And it pretty much just snowballed from there, I suppose. It started to get a little bit of traction. My blog got shared a lot of people related to my story. And then, yeah, I just started making videos about it was actually mostly about self-development stuff. It was only until later that I chose to narrow in on the psychedelic niche. But yeah, at the core, it was always about self-development. And I just so happened to talk about psychedelics, especially given that so many people were afraid to talk about it. So I wanted to give people permission to take off that mask and say, like, hey, it's okay to talk about this stuff. And it actually pissed me off knowing that so many people have gotten their life transformed for the better, but they don't speak about it because they're embarrassed about what their peers think, their parents, family, etc., etc. And I can understand in certain positions because, you know, maybe someone has had a corporate job for like 10 years and if he talks about this stuff, it could, you know, it might not turn out so well. So, yeah, I can understand now, but at the time I was just pissed off. Like, you know, you should start talking about this stuff more openly. Otherwise, it's never going to, you know, reach the public eye. Yeah.
So wait, how old were you when you started this?
Ayahuasca?
Yeah, like when you started the YouTube channel post ayahuasca.
Oh, right. This was just over 3 years ago. I was 22. Yeah, 22, 23.
That seems to be like the quintessential I'm going to change the world age.
Yeah.
And
pretty much.
Also definitely one of those ages where like ain't no authority going to stand in my way to change the world. So at what point, so I kind of have, and maybe some of the listeners have this advanced knowledge that, you know, eventually in your podcasting career, the manner in which you represent psychedelics on your channel takes and has taken a dramatic change, a dramatic shift.
Yes.
But before we get there, what you ended up like trying to say, all right, I'm doing personal growth stuff, spiritual development stuff, and then all of a sudden you started making videos that were all about tripping psychedelics. And do you feel like the popularity of your psychedelic videos created a type of box that popularity sort of pushed you into? And if so, like, how did that end up affecting your relationship to psychedelics and your relationship to a growing YouTube fame?
Yeah, right. So I definitely noticed that the videos that were related to psychedelics were getting more traction, more views. And this is when around the same time that I started my channel, Psych Substance started his channel, and then his channel started to blow up, and then his channel gave me more hope, like, whoa, there's actually something here, you know, and I saw the psychedelic movement growing exponentially, and I knew that I got into it at the right time. Like, I didn't start it because I thought it was going to get popular. I started it because I was genuinely passionate about it, and still am. But yeah, I definitely narrowed in to making more psychedelic related content. Mostly it was more of a business decision but when I decided it, I knew that I was going to split my channel and create a second channel, which I have, that was going to be purely dedicated on, you know, spiritual and personal growth, or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I decided to make more videos on psychedelics. And it did change my relationship with it, because now it's like I had this extra attachment and identification with psychedelics, being the psychedelic guy, and which definitely negatively affected me in the long run, I can see, because then it's like unconsciously it was like, oh, I'm the psychedelic guy, I should be able to handle these experiences better, I should know more, etc., etc. Or
I should do more, I should go bigger.
I should do more, yeah, exactly. Always having that at the back of my mind, even when I would trip, I'm like, oh, you know, I've got to make a trip report on this eventually, and just silly things like that, because I had this very psychedelic warrior mentality of, like, you know, kind of pushing this psychedelic agenda, and I didn't really know what I was getting myself into, because, as you know, psychedelics are very, very profound tools. It can be very light, can be very dark, and you really, really got to be vigilant when exploring these states of consciousness. And I was like, you know, some kid pretty much who just discovered this thing and started making videos about it. And it reminds me of those people who kind of drink ayahuasca once in a ceremony, and then they're like, oh, I want to be a shaman now. I'm going to open up my retreat after having like one experience. That's kind of how I feel with the YouTube channel. It's at the start. I've definitely matured since then. But yeah, I was definitely just pushing that too much. And maybe there's a few reasons for that. But yeah, it was more, like I said, the reason why I chose to narrow in on psychedelics is, I was just getting more views, and I thought it was the wiser business decision to just grow that organically. Because it's like, it's weird when you mix too many things in one channel, then it's like harder to grow. Because like you might release a psychedelic video and people really dig that, they subscribe to your channel, but then you release something like, I don't know, how to reduce social anxiety, and then people are like, oh, I didn't sign up for this, and they unsubscribe, and vice versa. So yeah, I thought it was just smart. It would be smart to split the two channels. That way I can just be more free to be silly and really do controversial stuff, and narrow in on psychedelics.
But then anytime the thing is, like, anytime we focus on something, that thing grows, right? So for reasonably good entrepreneurial reasons, you end up focusing on psychedelics. And then I think what's interesting is the psychedelic ego trip, like the post-ego dissolution ego trip, where all of a sudden it's like, and I was there too, like, oh my God, psychedelics are going to save the world. I still believe that to some degree, but at the time it's like, and I know how and why, and everybody else needs to know how and why, and I'm going to tell them, and I need to tell them, because I got to be like in everyone's face about how good psychedelics are. And I mean, I'm hyperbolizing, maybe being a bit hard on myself, but definitely there's that early evangelical tendencies. And you and I share a similar archetype and story to some degree. And to sort of to preface in to you telling answering this next question, I'll say that as I got more into doing the psychedelic thing, and I got more recognized as the psychedelic guy, and my ego started constructing itself around a psychedelic cultural identity, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, I still hadn't, sorted out what it was that I was trying to prove. And so I was still subconsciously trying to prove something or fix something or heal something or attend to something in an unsustainable way, that eventually I ended up being that psychedelic guy pushing the limits to a certain point, wherein I ended up really hurting myself because I had no wisdom or guidance or forethought as to how actually intense being a psychedelic person is if you're going to truly commit to this path, and then had to deal with the consequences. When I was on your podcast, we talked fairly deeply about that, and you had mentioned to me that, like I said, we had this similar sort of pattern, similar archetype in our story, which is that you ended up getting yourself traumatized by a psychedelic trip. What happened, and how did you respond, and how has it impacted your relationship to life and approach to psychedelics over the last, since it happened?
Okay. That's a heavy question. But yeah, so I've had some pretty scary trips, for sure. And like, people have the misconception and think that I must trip all the time, or that I did trip a lot these last couple of years because of my YouTube channel. And that's not the case at all. In fact, I probably trip less than most psychonauts. But when I do trip, because I have a very extreme all or nothing personality, I go really, really, really freaking deep. So I have these incredibly powerful experiences. Unnecessarily, of course, looking back on hindsight, I was the whole like 5 grams in silent darkness and all that kind of jazz. When, not knowing that it's probably best to build your foundation first, before having those heavy experiences. But anyways, I digress. So I had I collaborated with Adam from Psych Substance, which I'm sure many people have heard of by now. And I decided to take Iboga, and this was a small trip. At the time, we researched it and thought that 5 grams would be enough. At the time, we thought it would be like a strong microdose in a sense, because a flood dose is 20 grams plus. And this experience was the one that really changed the course of my life forever in terms of how I see reality, myself, and my approach to psychedelics. And like I said, I've had some pretty scary experiences prior, especially like with ayahuasca in particular. which was very traumatic. But at least after the trip was over, I was like back in this reality and like, oh, okay, it's over. This Iboga trip actually stuck with me, which was the terrifying part. So anyways, I had the trip, and I've made a video about it, so I'm not going to go into detail on the actual trip itself. But from those who know about Iboga, it's practically a 3-day experience. Like, yeah, the first day is like the most intense psychedelic part, and for me it was very physical and nauseous and very challenging, but not mentally. So the first day was just like physically grueling, but it was the second and third day where my mindset just completely shifted, and I was in this kind of like this timeless abyss, and really, really tapped into the collective suffering of humanity. So I was almost like a conduit of all the suffering of all time that humanity has ever gone through. So it was pretty dark, to say the least, and I was seeing the malevolent side of reality, or God, if you will. And I felt like I was in this infinite loop, that there's no escape to existence, that we're just going to go back here forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, and that I was going to be in suffering for the rest of eternity. Pretty heavy shit. And I was really acutely aware of the impermanence of life, meaning that I was in this grieving process and feeling the pain and suffering that all my friends and loved ones were going to go to, and that everyone that I know and love is going to die, but feeling as if that was happening constantly, if that makes sense. And yeah, that's like, in a nutshell, that's pretty much what I went through for the first 2 days in its most intense form. So it was like a lot of sobbing, crying, and hopelessness, despair, existential angst, and all that kind of stuff. But like I said, after the trip was over, that perspective switch completely shifted for me, and I couldn't detach myself to that emotional charge of hopelessness, despair, and this existential sorrow, I guess, for humanity. And so yeah, the next few months, especially the next few months, was like so dark, and it was like, I don't know, it was like beyond anything that I've ever experienced. And I've had some pretty hard times, and I've gone through depression and anxiety and been addicted to drugs and yada, yada, yada. But this was like this whole other this, I don't know, it was like this spiritual pain. It's really hard to describe, but it's
maybe
like,
describe some of the symptoms you were having. What was happening in your life as you were going through? Like, how were your relationships being affected? How were
right?
How was your work being affected? How was your sleep being affected?
Well, luckily, I didn't have to go back to a day job, which I'm so blessed and lucky that I didn't have to. But making YouTube videos was definitely a big, big struggle, and my motivation was just almost non-existent. And everyone, when I did have to make videos and do work and things like that, it was maybe one day a week when I'd actually have the inspiration to do so, and I'll, bounce on that opportunity as soon as I could. Mm-hmm. But it was more, lack of motivation, like really intense chronic fatigue, deep sadness, and the emotions I was going through, just hopelessness, and just my mind was very fixated on the darkness of this world. And it's funny because this last year was like the healthiest I've ever been in my life. So I was going to the gym 3-4 times a week. I was eating cleaner than I ever have in my life, going outside. Like, I was doing all these things on the outside which should make me feel better. And I'm sure it helped, because imagine if I didn't do those things, then it would be much worse. I was getting therapy and coaching, and I was really trying my hardest to get over this, but just that emotional attachment just couldn't get severed. And but in terms of my relationships, I was definitely more dependent for my girlfriend. Like, I really struggled to be alone. That's when the existential waves really hit hard. So any chance that I had, I just wanted to hang out with someone, whether it was my friends or my girlfriend, this or that, which eventually I saw that it wasn't good for me to do that, to be so overly dependent. So I ended up going to Southeast Asia, traveling by myself for about 2 months, which helped. You know, I did like silent meditation retreat, trained some Muay Thai, like rode a motorbike, drove through the mountains, like all that kind of stuff. So
the whole Southeast Asia experience.
Yeah, it was good. And my weed consumption definitely went up a lot since I got back from Canada after that existential crisis. So I was smoking a lot of weed. And I've had addictive issues with weed in the past, so it was very easy for me to kind of slip back in the seductive mistress of Mary Jane. And yeah, it was definitely tough, but weed was like, for me, it acted as this life-saving raft because I was just drowning in chaos pretty much every day. But yeah, eventually I got significantly better, especially through the help with coaching and therapy, meditating and self-inquiring, especially learning really, really ugly truths about myself and reality, because I had almost this new age rose-colored glasses to a certain degree.
What kind of ugly truths did you learn? Like, you don't have to share anything about yourself that's obviously private to you, but like, what kind of ugly truths did you have to grapple with to make sense of your suffering? It's more,
for example, like I've been following the teaching of Jordan Peterson a lot, and he's helped tremendously through this journey for sure. And it was more going face to face with that we all have the potential for true malevolence, let's say. And it, you know, like the line between good and evil goes straight between every human heart, and that we all have the capacity to do like horrendous fucking shit. And I couldn't help, like, the dark truth that I struggled accepting was that, yes, we're in the sense like, yeah, we're all one, and every human being, every life form is like a different let's say manifestation of the universe expressing itself. You know, that's how I felt in the time. And a lot of people think that, oh, we're all God, and like this is like this beautiful thing, but I saw it as like, I don't know if that's necessarily a positive truth, because if you're everything in life, yeah, guess what? You're the pedophiles, you're the murderers, you're the Hitlers, you're everything. So it was like more seeing that part of myself, and when I say myself, I'm talking about humanity in general. Because yeah, my empathy has definitely increased 100-fold since this existential crisis, but now I'm finally building those walls up again where I can kind of shield myself off for unnecessary pain from others and stuff. Yeah, it was more those kind of stuff, like just acknowledging the true darkness of the shadow if you don't face it. You know what I mean? And something that I learned is like, it's not necessarily the darkness that fucks us up, it's the resistance to the darkness. But sometimes that darkness is so overwhelming that it's like you don't want to face it. So, but I had no choice.
Well, so, I mean, it was face it or die ultimately, I suppose.
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, I've definitely lost a lot of innocence, and like there's a positive and negative to all these kind of things, you know. There's a blessing in every curse and a curse in every blessing. And I have definitely found myself more grounded in this reality and really seeing the divinity and the sacredness of all the most subtle things in this, you know, reality, whatever you want to call it. And it's definitely made me less naive, for sure, and really looking at, like, there's some really fucked up shit in this world, and sometimes we have to acknowledge it instead of just sweeping it under the rug. But obviously, it's a balance and not overwhelming ourselves and focusing on it too much, because then that can consume you as well. So yeah, it's just on a balance.
There's definitely something about coming to directly experience how horrid and terrifying life can be, and all the wretched suffering that can exist, and having that sort of blended with the reality of everyone you care about going through suffering, and everyone that you love dying, and everyone that you love that dies after you, feeling the grief of your dying, and that you're capable of utmost evil and all these horrid, horrid things. To give you perspective on why life is worth giving a shit about, and to see the beauty in those small moments of just to see the value in those small moments of beauty once you can come to terms with facing those things. How did finding yourself in a situation where you had been harmed and wounded by your psychedelic endeavors, how did that impact the way that you showed up in your YouTube channels, which prior to that point you showed up as a posy psychedelic guy, psychedelics can save the world, championing this great thing, and then all of a sudden here you are, like, wounded, traumatized to your core by the very same thing that you just told literally hundreds of thousands of people was great. Like, how did that impact your sense of self, and how did that impact your YouTube content and how you presented yourself?
Well, the first 3 months after this whole existential crisis was like the worst of it, and then after that I started to heal, and maybe about a month ago I'm finally crossed that line of being grateful for that experience. Actually, a little bit. I still am bitter about it in many ways, if I'm honest, but I'm definitely past that line of, it's actually a good thing that happened. But anyways, that first few months after that crisis, let's say that I was very biased against psychedelics, but I didn't want to make videos about it because I knew that was my emotional state at the time. And if I was to make videos about it, it would be too unfair. And I'd be projecting my own fear and trauma, which I still do to this day, but it's just much less. Mm-hmm. And I'm trying to be really as unbiased as I possibly can, which is one of the reasons why I didn't want that last interview that we did together. It's just because I was being a little bit too harsh and unfairly, and I've really had time to kind of reflect. And it's like, you know what? No, that was just my stupidity and recklessness which led me to this in the first place, because I didn't do Iboga with a Bwiti shaman in Africa and this sacred ceremony. I did it with someone who has no fucking idea about it. Like, Adam, he knows his shit when it comes to psychedelics, but not when it comes to Iboga, and not when it comes to experience. Because as you know, with these very potent psychedelic tools, you need a practitioner. Well, in my opinion, I think you need a practitioner if you're going to go high doses.
You need somebody who has the wisdom on how to grapple with the inescapable realities that you'll encounter when you go deep. And if you don't have that, then you're stuck holding the bag, and that bag is full of fucking maggots, and they're going to consume you. But you can't put them down. You can't do anything about it. They're yours, but you don't know what to do with it, and they're constantly crawling on you when you're not looking, and
exactly. And it's important to have, I feel at peace when I know that whoever I'm getting guided with or facilitated, that they have seen the whole gamut of experiences through the psychedelic experience, and they know what to do when shit hits the fan, But anyways, I guess my whole my approach with psychedelics, the first couple months was like, I think it's sort of similar to what I think you wrote an article about your really dark ayahuasca experience.
Ayahuasca.
And then I started, so I started to go through these theories like, fuck, what happened if psychedelics, they're like these demonic tools that open you up to these entities, and they trick you, and they make you think it's all positive and fun and games, but really it's just a way for them to get invited into your vessel. I don't know, whatever you want to call it, but I thought it was like a very easy way to kind of get consumed by these malevolent forces. And I've had this discussion a lot, whether these things are like real entities outside of us or whether they're just figments of our imagination. They can still be just as profound either way, so I never looked at it that way. Your imagination can be very damaging if you believe it strong enough. But anyways, so I had these very dark notions of psychedelics, especially given what I went through, because I had a very horrendous ayahuasca experience that I tried to kill myself, to put it bluntly. And
wait. So when was this? Like around the same time as the Iboga?
About a month before Iboga. Yeah. And just right? So I've had this horrendous experience where I had a psychotic breakdown. I thought I was going to die. I thought the only way out was to kill myself. But luckily I was, obviously there was a facilitator. And I continued because after I went down from that experience, I was like, whew, I feel a bit silly now. It was a bit traumatizing, but actually my brain took like a month or two to really acknowledge how traumatizing that experience was. I swept it under the rug. I'm like, oh yeah, it was pretty scary. It was fucked up. It was traumatic. But I'm like, okay, I'm sort of over it. It's okay.
Well, that's what James Kent calls like the post psychedelic, or what do you call it? Like post psychotic break hypomania.
Yeah.
Yeah. He says something like that. Well, after you have a psychotic break, when you come down, you go into a manic place. It's like a transient hypomania. So it doesn't last long and it's not super intense, but you're like, oh yeah, I'm fine. Everything's good. But that's actually your psyche trying to like dissociate you from the full damage of what happened. And so let's freeze on that. You're drinking ayahuasca, you go down, you have a terrible experience. You have we're using a specific language, psychotic break, psychotic episode, right? Perhaps in a different language, it might be described differently in a different cultural situation. But from our vantage point, we'll say you completely lost your fucking mind and you tried to kill yourself. Yeah. And then
screeching.
And why was it, and screeching and everything?
Yeah, dude. Like getting aggressive. I remember that like I was a little bit there that I could still be like, I'm like, I was like demanding a gun to my head. And I remember the facilitator came and was like, mate, don't make me fight you. Get me a gun. I was going to, like, I'm laughing about it now because, like, I can. But, yeah, I got pretty aggressive. I didn't hurt anyone, but it was like, I was on the borderline.
Right.
Yeah.
So, like, in hindsight, what in your right mind made you think that after that it was a good idea to keep drinking ayahuasca?
Because I still had the trust. I had faith. And I thought that, like, I didn't want that to be my last experience because I knew that would be even worse. This is what I was thinking at the time anyway. And I knew that if I continued and showed my trust in these medicines, that I would go full circle and I would know why that happened and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I did skip a ceremony after that, obviously. And the following ceremony after that, I had a very beautiful experience, and it went full circle for me. But yeah, I guess why did I continue? I don't know. Maybe I'm a bit crazy, and I just thought these things happen. Whatever.
Well, you just gave a fairly reasonable explanation. Yeah, you gave a fairly reasonable.
Yeah.
Because I asked because I nearly died in Peru and decided that the best course of action was not to stop and take some space and maybe go for a hike in the mountains and, reflect on the beauty of life. No, I felt like it was a good idea to keep letting the medicine open me up and like immediately the next day get dropped off in another retreat center.
Right.
But for me, there were other conditions. There was one, it's not like, oh, it'll bring me full circle, but like, no, this is the path, right? This is the psychedelic warrior path. Just keep going. Just keep going. Just keep going. Which was, in hindsight now, having come out of it, probably a good choice in the sense that it offered me really good learning. But insofar as the quality of my mental health over the succeeding 3 years, it was a terrible choice. It was a horrible, stupid choice. Because I got into a dark place. Curious about what you can remember. Is there an overlap of emotional, philosophical, or psychological themes from that "give me a gun" moment with ayahuasca to what you encountered with iboga to what you then grappled with months afterwards?
Well, the theme was because during that ayahuasca breakdown I was in this timeless abyss and every moment was eternity, but excruciating, infinite level of suffering, I guess. And I did have these themes where I was the conduit of the collective suffering of humanity and how,
that's in iboga and in ayahuasca.
And ayahuasca, yeah. The ayahuasca was more intense during the moment, of course. I was like fucking screaming and shit.
Right.
And Iboga was like, it was less intense, but it was spread out and it stuck with me. That was the horrific part of it. Because, Adam says the same thing. It's like, what? I don't understand how you can go through such a traumatic experience with ayahuasca, and I've had some pretty scary encounters with mushrooms as well. And I keep going, but then this Iboga trip where it wasn't as, like, intense for the moment, but that's the one that kind of traumatized me the most. It's just kind of interesting.
Well, maybe it's because you had 72 hours to suffer through it rather than a few hours.
True. Right. Yeah. And because it's a permanent perspective switch. That was the terrifying part. And it made me kind of, when you lose hope, it sucks. You kind of need it. It's a prerequisite. You need that purpose and meaning to get going with your life. And, it makes all the suffering kind of worth it in a lot of ways. And for me, how I felt during the time was like, this wasn't worth it. I wish I never got on this path. I wish I took the blue pill. I wish I was just ignorant and didn't know any of this shit. Mm-hmm. Even if that meant that I would be depressed and addicted to drugs, it wouldn't be nowhere near the pain that I'm feeling right now. That's kind of how I felt. Because at least, like, and it's really like dark and fucked up to say, but this is just the thought process that I went through straight after was like, it was like I was beyond suicide in a lot of sense, because at least when I was younger and I struggled with suicidal thoughts, it's like, if shit hits the fan, at least I can kind of exit out of this reality. Right. Whereas during the Iboga, it was like, well, there is no fucking escape. There's no point in killing yourself. I'm just going to come back over and over and over and over again for eternity. So it was like, there is no escape.
That is really defeating, hey?
Yeah. Exactly. It's like, holy shit.
Can I ask you some more personal questions?
Yeah, go for it, man. Go for it. Because I've talked about this stuff on my channel before, so it's all good. Yeah.
Right. So the themes that you encountered in your psychedelic experience, like this hell with no escape, the eternal suffering, are those themes present earlier in your life as well?
Yeah, I feel like I was always, like, when I go back, when I was younger, I always gravitated towards, like, darkness in a lot of ways. Yeah, just like, like whether it was movies or video games or like heavy metal. And I don't know, it's like a part of me liked to suffer unconsciously. Maybe that's why I got into all these kind of things. I don't know. I don't know what my relationship with it is, but I know it's part of my purpose to kind of understand it in a way so that I can carry the torch and help other people out of that dark cave. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
I definitely know what you mean. Though I'm going to ask you another, like, more pointed question. If it was a theme, hell with no escape, basically hell with no escape, we'll just call it that.
All right.
Is that theme, can you see it present in any other places in your life prior to it emerging in ayahuasca?
Prior.
Like that specific theme, as if it were a sound or a color.
Right. Or how would that escape?
Or however you would describe what you went through.
Yeah, I guess I have gone through a little bit of that hopelessness, despair, humanity's fucked. I definitely use drugs to escape from this, but then, and as you've had experience, drugs can appear to be your best friend at the start, but then it turns on you real quick. So I guess that was my version of an inescapable hell. And I mean, and even though it was really just with weed and alcohol, to me, the way I used it was more damaging than most people use hard drugs. You know what I mean?
But it was to try to escape this feeling.
Oh, yeah, definitely, yeah, from my own pain. But that's why I numbed myself. So when I was younger, I was like I've always been a sensitive child. But looking back, I convinced myself of this narrative that I wasn't sensitive and I was tough and cold and kind of numb to all this kind of shit until I had my first psychedelic experience, which kind of opened Pandora's box and helped me feel again.
So this line of questioning is trying to track, because as much as we can go into some very dark places, and it's possible to discuss transpersonal realms in this discussion with psychedelics, that stuff, it just doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes from inside of us, right? So that's why I'm curious, like, you know, was this theme in your life, and did it just like manage to break through in a way that you completely lost grip on in the ayahuasca, and then seep in like long, deep, arduous ache in the iboga? That's my question. Like, is this something that just kind of like, whoa, was this a new revelation? Oh my God. Or was it something that you've carried with you? Like, where did it come from?
I think I dabbled in those kind of thoughts, but this was like the experience of it. Like, yeah, this is true. This is hell. Welcome. Yeah, it's interesting that you asked that, because now I haven't really gave it a proper look, but I do believe, because Adam actually interviewed me about these traumatic trips, and with the ayahuasca, I do believe that it was a part of it was repressed emotions. That's like, as soon as the ayahuasca tried to kind of poke at it, my ego was like, nah, fuck this, get me a gun, I can't fucking deal with this. It's like, it would rather die than face that. So I definitely think there's a lot of unresolved, let's say, themes from my childhood, and now thinking about this inescapable hell, yeah, I kind of felt like that in my household for the longest time. So I just wanted to get the fuck out of here. I've always felt like that, and my self-defense mechanism my whole life, even now sometimes I'm just more aware of it, so I don't let it happen as much, is I put the I don't give a fuck kind of phase. I drop defenses. I don't care about this. That's my defense mechanism. So maybe that ayahuasca was like tapping into something. All the times that I've said that and swept things under the rug, all those things accumulated has turned into this pretty nasty monster under the bed, so to speak. So maybe it's something to do with that. Like, I don't know.
So I'm going to keep asking you. I'm going to keep asking you a couple questions. Feel free to answer as openly or non-transparently as you want.
Yeah, go for
and
it.
If there's anything that comes up that later you're like, I don't want that shared, I'll edit it out, because it is your personal story, right?
It's all good.
It's your choice to be transparent. When you were a child, were you in a living situation where you were unsafe and couldn't get, you obviously couldn't get out when you were a child, but were you in an emotional or social environment where you were unsafe? Like, so unsafe that it made life seem like this place of hopeless despair?
Safe as in, are you talking physically safe or just emotionally? Or just anything?
Anything, physically, emotionally, psychologically.
No, physically I was definitely never in danger. Definitely not. Emotionally, yeah, because there's always a lot of conflict kind of at home, and that's, again, my defense mechanism was to kind of shut myself off from that. And so I used to just escape this reality and go into video games. Video games was my earliest addiction. Yeah, like really fucking hardcore video game addiction. And then you mix that with weed later in life. Oof, quite a potent combination. But yeah, no, thinking about it, I always use video games as escapism. Yeah. I just never, I don't know, I don't even know what it is specifically about what I wanted to escape, but I was just never really content with this reality. I'm like, this place sucks, everyone's crazy, people are assholes. I always had that I've always had a cynical view of reality until my first ayahuasca experience, which, you know, was the kind of end of the opposite end of the spectrum.
Right.
And I had this very positive view, and now it's like balanced. Yeah.
Right. So you see where how I'm kind of digging here, right? Like these, and this is, I think, something that'll be really positive for people listening who are trying to grapple with where something came from, or in preparing themselves to do some sort of psychedelic experience, and they're wondering what might come up. It's like, if you dig, eventually this stuff doesn't come out of nowhere. It came from somewhere. So here's the next question. Tom, did your mother have any complications during birth, or while you were gestating, like while you were a fetus?
I don't think so.
Like any...
I've never really asked her, but I don't...
For example, would if she was in a stressful environment where she was under threat emotionally or psychologically, or socially, because of course, you know, like economic stresses can be really intense, and how the mother responds creates a specific environment. And then the other question was like, any issues with the birth, like were you birthed as a C-section or something else, like anything complicated that might have happened while you were in the womb?
In the womb, well, Mum's a very, you know, she's a kind of Catholic Latin mother, so you can imagine pretty intense, like very neurotic for sure. And like even in Chile, when she left Chile, there was that whole dictatorship that was going on, and so there was pretty fucking intense times. That's why a lot of Chileans fled the country and went to Australia. It was fucking hell, I'm so horrible for not remembering this. Pinochet, that was the guy who was killing people left, right, and center.
Was she pregnant with you when she came over?
No.
I don't know what the time frame is on that. So
yeah, I think it was in the 80s. No, she wasn't pregnant at that time. I'm just I'm just verbalizing it now just to see maybe that has something to do with the amount of stress.
So your mother comes from a place where she comes from a place that she had to flee because where she was living was basically a disparaging hell that there was basically no escape from except for literal escape.
Yeah. Whoa. No shit. Yeah. So she's fled that country and then lived in Brazil for 10 years and then came here. So I know that was before me even being in the womb, but of course, you know, as you know, trauma travels down intergenerationally.
Right.
So that could totally be something.
It's possible.
You know, and my dad's from fucking Poland, so it's like obviously that shit went down there as well. So it's like both sides of my family has a lot of conflict from where they came from. War-torn dictatorships with supreme violence where everyone around them was dying. And there was no point to it all, and it wouldn't even matter if they died, because even that was pointless, because there was no stopping it. Pretty much.
Does that sound familiar?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. Exactly. No shit. It was the interdimensional hell.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just tapping into that. So I guess I never really dug deep and thought about these kind of things. Yeah. Interesting.
I'd be curious for you to let me know in hindsight, not maybe necessarily for the public record, but how that lands later. If you feel in, you're like, yeah, you know what? Actually, I think they're unrelated. It was this other thing, or if you find a deeper relating, I'd be curious to know. Yeah, for sure. It's definitely something to ponder on, and I'm sure maybe a week, a month, a couple months from now about, no shit, this makes sense, or it doesn't make sense. Because I'm just verbalized. I don't know, this could be completely unrelated, but I don't know, everything in life is dependent of each other in some way, and it affects other areas in your life. But yeah, that could totally be something like that. But yeah, definitely a lot of conflict in my family history. So that's something that I blocked myself from my whole life. Yeah. And it's only, again, after this whole psychedelic spiritual awakening, whatever you want to call it, was when I've been more open and loving and compassionate and all that kind of stuff. As if you got yourself to a place where you had the psychological, emotional, spiritual holding capacity to grapple with the reality from whence you came. Yeah, that too. And also really forgiving and letting go of, because I used to have a lot of bitterness and resentment of my family, and now it's like, that literally it's all gone, even just because like they're fucking human, man. They tried their best. Everyone does the best they can at their state of consciousness, and there's no point holding anger or resentment towards anyone. You're just gonna hurt yourself in the long run. So yeah, that's all gone. Like it's all love, no bitterness. There's nothing I'm holding against anyone. It's fine in that aspect, but I guess there might be some things that I haven't really looked at, of course, on a childhood level. Haven't come up yet, or you haven't had cracked open yet.
Yeah. I just didn't know what I was getting myself into. Because sometimes you think, like with these psychedelic experiences, especially your first one, it's like, oh man, I've gone through all these revelations, I've gone through spiritual growth, and you're like, oh, I'm healed.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, nah, man, those demons come back, and there's always deeper things that you haven't realized. So, yeah, I think like I was just scratching the surface first time I took ayahuasca. And I guess one of the reasons why I did continue even after that horrendous trip was because my very first ayahuasca experience was terrifying. I almost left the retreat of how terrifying it was. I didn't scream or anything like that, but it was more seeing like these demonic entities. I guess I saw the archetype that represented all the evil and darkness of the universe in one form. That's what I experienced, and that's what I saw. And then I wanted to leave. And then the shaman, the facilitator, is like, no, this is just your ego defending itself, and your demons are rising up to the surface, blah, blah, blah. So then I continued and had the most amazing, like the complete polar opposite experience. And that was the one that changed my life. So I thought that maybe this one would be similar. Like, I'm like, oh, well, I've had dark experiences before. Not to this level, but I don't know. Sometimes when you just continue, you might see the light out of it. Which I did through ayahuasca, just not iboga. But who knows? Maybe if I do it again, which I'm not going to, but if I was going to do it again,
you don't want to come. You don't want to come over to my house and we'll film it live. It'd be great.
Yeah, live stream. Exactly.
Man, there's nothing can go wrong.
Yeah, nothing.
All right, so I got a couple more questions for you before we go. Maybe slightly leaning away from that deeply personal place that you let us go to, which I really appreciate, Tom. I think it takes a good sense of character to be confident in going that vulnerable, since we're both on the public record here.
Right.
And
I used to really care about that kind of stuff, but not really anymore. We're all going to die anyway. Doesn't really matter.
Well, I mean, like, actually,
not to be green, but that's like in a positive way, like, you know what I mean? Like when you're in your deathbed, you're not going to look back on the time like, oh, I was a little bit too vulnerable during that interview. Like, you're not going to look back on that kind of shit. So,
right, yeah.
It doesn't matter.
It's funny, I have the same concept, but I language it differently. And it's like, oh, we're all going to die, it doesn't fucking matter, is one way. Or we're all going to die, I better make every moment count because it's all gone eventually. And I'm the only... That's
what I mean. I just like to say crude things sometimes.
No, it's okay. It's okay. It seems to be like maybe a playful carryover from your days of I don't give a shit, you know?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, exactly.
Like blending the two.
I can be very crude and brutally honest. In my joking, but that's my humor. So
let's get back into the train of things. So here you are, because I think we got lost. We didn't get lost. We went somewhere else than where I thought we were going. Here you are. You're a psychedelic YouTube celebrity, a psychedelic champion, you could say.
Okay.
With tens of thousands, even maybe hundreds of thousands of people who have witnessed your positive championing of psychedelics. And then you get a very unfortunate but inevitable encounter with the true depth of darkness that is your being. And you don't have the social, psychological, spiritual education or container or relationships that you need to make sense of that. And you end up getting harmed. And here you are harmed, and you're still a psychedelic YouTube celebrity, but you're maybe in a place where you're like, fuck psychedelics. Like, you know, like possibly, I don't want to put words in your mouth here. And then fast forward, eventually, as of not that long ago, you start releasing a couple videos. One of them is Psychedelics Won't Save You, where you become very candid about how it's like, these aren't magic bullets for your transcendence. These are powerful tools that, you know, like can hurt as much as heal if you're not careful. Yeah. And then you go so far as to have a video where you all but renounce psychedelics to some degree in your own life. Why don't you talk to me about that process of coming to, like, psychologically, what did you have to grapple with before you could get to a point to admit the psychedelic champion ego that you had built in the world outside of you, you needed to confront that and get transparent about having been hurt.
Okay, so that last video talking about, so I'm only personally speaking because I can't speak for everybody, and I do know some people that have quite a few psychedelic experiences and they go back and back and back again, but they're those people who are so vigilant with their integration and they fucking do the work, where I would go as far as to say that the vast majority of people just don't, including even myself. So a part of why I've renounced it, at least, just let me make it clear that this is my emotional state at the moment. It could be forever that I don't trip again, or it could just be a really, really, really freaking long time. Like, maybe 10 years, who knows? Because I don't want to renounce it out of ego, you know what I mean, as well. Mm-hmm. But anyways, the reason why I have decided to stop exploring psychedelics myself is just, number one, the experiences that I've had have been so heavy, and there's just so much integration. There's so much shit in my life that I've got to take care of before venturing out, in these higher dimensions. And I'm only now getting to the place where I'm so happy, like I'm so grounded within this reality and really enjoying everything that this life has to offer. Whereas before, I think some part of me, I mean, yes, of course I was using psychedelics to face myself in many ways, but I think a little part of me was using it as escapism. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Because it's amazing going to those blissful states.
Spiritual
and whatnot.
bypassing.
Yeah, spiritual bypassing. I definitely fell into that trap. And that's an amazing book, Spiritual Materialism, by the way. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I definitely got into the trap of having this spiritual ego, because it's like, yeah, we think psychedelics dissolve your ego, it kills it, and like it can momentarily, but then it can come back even stronger, right? What resists persists, if you're not careful, of course. And then, yeah, I was too overly attached with psychedelics, and I guess I had a bit of remorse. I was feeling a bit of remorse because of my channel and how many people I have influenced to take psychedelics. And then part of me is like, oh, what happened if some of those people have had, a horrendous experience, or their life has been worsened because of me? And I wasn't putting too much guilt on myself because, of course, if you're watching a video, some guy on YouTube talk about psychedelics and then you decide to take it, that's on you.
Right, but at the same time, you have a responsibility to the people who look up to you.
Exactly. I still have a responsibility whether I like it or not. And so I was just more, more strict. And a lot of people complain that I'm like, oh, now I'm just overemphasizing the negatives. But it's like, it's not that I'm overemphasizing the negatives. It's more the balance, because I was too positive before. And like, yeah, I talked about the negatives, but I wasn't really talking about the negatives the same weight as which I was shining the positives in. So it's like, I wasn't truly unbiased. So now I felt like it was my duty to really express how dark these experiences can be. And, a lot of people think that, oh, there's no such thing as a bad trip. And I think that's fucking bullshit. Yeah, I know some people have like psychotic breaks and they spend the rest of their life in a mental institution.
Right.
I'm pretty sure that I would consider that a bad trip.
Yeah, some people confront some things that changes them forever in a way that they're no longer, like, they can no longer live their lives.
Yeah. And it happens a lot more than people like to admit as well. And then, yeah, you could always argue, like, yeah, that's because this person had X, Y, Z, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, but they wouldn't have gone to that place if they didn't recklessly use this substance. But anyways.
Right. Well, I mean, statistically speaking, it isn't a vast majority or anything. It is still a minority of people who have bad trips. But just because it's a minority doesn't mean that it's not a vitally important topic to emphasize and consider. Yeah. Because for the people who it's having, who have these experiences, it's not a mundane interaction. It's truly vital that there's information.
That's why I get really heated about this stuff. It's not that I'm trying to say that, oh, this happens to most people, but it's when people sweep under the rug, like, yeah, but that's only the minority. It's only the minority. But it's like, yeah, but you don't understand how fucking dark it is to be in that place. Like, I wouldn't even if it happened to just one person in human history, I would still be passionate about this because that's still a fellow human being. You know what I mean? It's still another reflection of you. It's like this lack of empathy that really grinds my gears that people have. They just, oh yeah, but it's just, it's like, you know, they treat this statistic as a number instead of a human being who's had their life ruined because of this. And then you're not willing to talk about the negatives kind of thing. And then people have, because I've been getting a little bit of backlash for talking about these things, even though I've been quite clear that I am just projecting from my own personal experience, but people think, you know, jumping down my throat and like, you shouldn't speak about these negative things and blah, blah, blah. Some people think like, oh, you're just someone said that I'm a undercover CIA agent, so I've been doing this whole thing as a ruse to gain all your trust, and then now I'm like, no, psychedelics are bad, which I haven't said at all, but anyways, some people are funny, and it just goes to show like there's and this is not just in the psychedelic community, this is in literally every community on this planet, is that you have a certain amount of people who have this cult-like following, and they over-identify themselves with, you know, this, whatever it is, whether it's psychedelics, yoga, being a vegan, again, whatever. So I've just noticed those type of people come out more. And I guess a little part of me wants to kind of weed out the crowd a little bit, so I've been making these videos. It's not the reason, but it's like on the back of my mind. It's like, I don't know. Because
I definitely make some posts that are quite controversial on my Facebook page, and don't speak my own opinions on the topics. I just like ask about controversial opinions, because I know that there are people in my friends group that, confronted with certain ideas, start to talk from a place of like deep racism or deep sexism or deep ignorance. I mean, if you get me at the right time, I'm gonna speak from deep ignorance on something somewhere, but I don't want to weed them out. I just want to know who they are and see if I can maintain a dialogue where everybody is still sharing each other's ideas and keeping people from getting upset, or not upset, keeping people from getting violent with each other, so that these ideas can be talked about. So it's nice to see that you have a diversity of people that are interacting with your content.
Yeah, and maybe weeding out the crowd isn't the right terminology to use, because if I truly wanted to, then I would be a lot more negative and not state that like, oh, you know, this is just my emotional state at the moment. I'm probably projecting blah blah. Like, I wouldn't say those things if I was truly trying to just weed out the crowd. Right. But I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. But it's like, just a part of me is like, it's just nice to know who your true audience is, in a sense.
Who your audience is in truth.
Yes,
who they truly
exactly.
are.
Yeah, exactly.
Definitely for myself, watching your sort of like the big, like the confession video, or I don't know, whatever you want to call it. I can't remember what did you name that video? The one where you're like,
why I don't trip anymore?
Why I don't trip anymore?
Are you talking about that one?
Yeah, that's the one. I watched it, and having been in, I feel like a similar place as to you've been, insofar as response to uncomfortable, like response to dark encounters, not necessarily that I was in the exact same place you went to. But I saw it and I was like, I know where he's speaking from, and there's definitely still some some heat and self-protection there. But you also 100%. Were like very conscientious about that, or you were very self-aware about like, I don't even know if I'll feel this way in 6 months, but this is where I'm at now, and I think it's really important.
Yeah. I used it as a video journal in a sense. So like, I know that I'm going to look back on it and be like, oh, I shouldn't have said this, I shouldn't have said that, blah, 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 blah. Like, but who gives a fuck? I'm just going to express myself how I feel at the moment, and whether it's going to change or not, most people will understand that anyway. So it's like, it's all good. I think it's important just to express it's interesting when you express your raw thoughts and emotions, even if you know that it's going to change over time. But that's always the case with life anyway. So
yeah, there's definitely a balance, like the discernment between speaking yourself authentically and like conscientiously not speaking certain things, because that authenticity in that moment might be more harm than good.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought it was, I still think it was worth doing for sure, and just sharing some more of my honest thoughts about this topic. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to me not being ready for these experiences and me prematurely going back to the psychedelic experience without properly integrating. You know, it's like I put in the video as well, Jordan Peterson talked about it, but Carl Jung said, beware of unearned wisdom.
Yeah, that was a good line. Very good line.
And that stuck with me. And I have pondered that quote a lot, you know, and it's like, yeah, sure, you have this tool that can, you know, give you access to God, so to speak, but doesn't mean that you have the vessel that can handle this divinity, you know what I mean? You might not be ready for it. Mm-hmm. So it made me realize that I wasn't ready for it, and there's a lot more foundation work that I need to do, and it just goes back to focusing on the simple things, like Jordan Peterson talks about it a lot, like, you know, clean your room, fucking get your own life in order, and focus on the little things like eating healthy, stop eating junk, exercise, be a good person, be kind. Whereas a lot of, well, I can speak for myself, but I know a lot of other people do it, where they jump into this, like, Wim Hof breathing, 10-day fasting, Vipassana, psychedelics, Ayahuasca, and like these really intense spiritual practices, but then they don't have the basics covered. Mm-hmm. And when you have a shaky foundation, that skyscraper you're striving to build will just come crumbling down like a house of cards. So you got to be careful in starting off easy, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Again, I'm speaking for myself because that's my personality. Yep. I just want to jump the gun, skip to level 99 and not do the work kind of thing. That's how I used to, but now I can say with confidence that I don't think like that anymore, and I'm really being more present and focusing on the subtleties of life because it's beautiful. Yeah.
Well, Tom, I think that one of the greatest mistakes a public figure can make is to have a deep internal change of opinion and to continue to pretend that they haven't changed their opinion simply to, and I think I'm going to use this word right, maintain their sycophants and maintain their following and their popularity. So I just want to acknowledge that I want to acknowledge you in being honest, despite the fact that to a significant degree, your following as a, I don't know what you want to call yourself, or I'll call you a YouTube celebrity, is a big contributing factor to how you sustain yourself financially, socially, and it is part of your professional work in this world. And you took a gamble by doing that, but I think you took the right gamble. So I just want to acknowledge that. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. I think it was definitely the right choice. Because like in the long run, I don't know, it would just be more exhausting kind of building this persona. So it's good to just lay down the cards early. Agreed. Yeah. So speaking of all your hard work and your YouTube channel, why don't we end the interview off here by giving us your handles and your links. And in particular, I know that you're also on Patreon, so maybe your link to Patreon as well. Yeah. So most of the work I do is on YouTube. I also have a second channel, Raw Spirituality, which kind of just focuses on a practical approach to personal spiritual growth. And I want to put more time into that. I'm just working on my finances, so I'm in a position to do so. And then if you want to help with that, of course, I've got a Patreon as well. It just helps me produce content for my main channel and my second channel. And I also have a podcast as well, which I really, really enjoy doing. And so everything can be found there at yourmatetom.com. Is that right? You it's all there. Yeah, yourmatetom.com. And you're on Instagram, apart Facebook. From that, Instagram, that's the other one that I'm most active on outside of YouTube, which is at yourmatetom3. I think you can find some pretty cool stuff there. Like photography is one of my hobbies, so I like to just take some cool shots and put it on there. Great. Yeah, I'm not I do have Facebook and all that, but I don't really use it. So cool. Well, I will make sure that there are links to everything that you're using and distributing, and I look forward to watching your videos on Raw Spirituality when you can get get yourself sorted out to do so. I can very personally relate as to how much money and time it takes to do this. It is very much a full-time profession and often does not get 100%. Paid as a full-time profession unless you're willing to have really easily consumed candy content, which it appears that you're not interested in. So exactly.
Or you got to like be very vigilant with your business model.
Right, or have a whole team, like a media empire behind you to do it.
Yeah. That's all a journey, and I guess it's just about enjoying it as it progresses. It's all good. Yeah.
It's all good.
I'm happy.
Thanks for being on the show,
All
Tom.
is well. Awesome, brother. Thanks for having me on.
Cut.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Adventures Through the Mind. I deeply appreciate your listenership. I also deeply appreciate the patronage of my various patrons and non-patron supporters that enable this show to exist. If you would like to support this show, I please encourage you to head over to patreon.com/James W. Gesso to become my patron on Patreon, or to drop me a donation via PayPal or cryptocurrency. Links to that are contained in the description below, as is the links to buy this limited edition blotter art. Whenever you support the show via buying blotter art or by becoming a patron or leaving a donation, you are not only supporting the foundation costs of producing the content, but also the costs of investing into making it bigger and better and greater. For example, the on-location interviews that I'm going to be getting this summer as I travel through Europe on the equipment that you can't see because I'm using it to record this intro. Anyways, thank you for buying Blotter, or by becoming my patron on Patreon, or even just by liking and sharing this episode across your social media. I will see you in 2 weeks for the next episode of Adventures Through the Mind. Thanks, and take care.